Well, hello there, lovelies. Welcome to episode 24. I am Jennie O'Connor, and I write and create courses about mastering your mindset so you can stop settling for less, start asking for more, and finally do the thing that scares you. Like no longer doing what you feel someone expects you to do so that you have room in your life to do exactly what you want. Basically, the type of stuff that we talk about on this show. If you are already subscribed, you are amazing. You are. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, you are also amazing. But do be sure to hit subscribe because I have so many lessons coming up about my favorite topic of all time. And there's so much to dig into that I'm not going to waste any more time introducing it. We are just going to dive right on in. So you ready? I heard it said recently, and I can't remember if this was in an interview that I was conducting or a podcast I was listening to, but I heard it said that courage begets courage. Basically meaning if you can find the courage to do one thing now, it becomes easier and easier to muster that same courage to do more scary things moving forward. And it's been rattling around in my brain ever since I heard it because it dawned on me that this year, 2021, has proven this is so true, for me at least, in spades. So it started at the beginning of the year when I decided to finally embrace being visible in my business by starting the podcast. And as soon as I started the podcast, I was immediately presented with a ton of opportunities that I found to be really scary. Like requesting interviews with people that I'm low-key starstruck over. Super scary. Agreeing to be interviewed myself for the very first time. Like the first time was so nerve-wracking, you guys. I think I might have taken a shot beforehand. I joined a group coaching cohort led by a pretty famous author. And that might not sound scary, but being on Zoom in a group of people I didn't know was scary for me once upon a time. Like, I don't know. I have social anxiety. It was a lot. But I've moved on from there to share some pretty vulnerable stuff on camera. Not something I ever thought I would do. Then I publicly announced that I was starting to write my novel. So now I'm being held accountable to anyone who knows me, basically. A year ago, any of these things would have made my knee pit sweat. And I am here to tell you knee pit sweat is way worse than armpit sweat because people expect you to be sweating from your armpits. But when stuff is running down your legs because your knees are sweating, you've got all kinds of problems. Courage being probably the least of them. But my point in telling you all of this is that when I think over this list now, and this is only, what's happened in the last 7 months, pretty much, I get this feeling that's like, I got this. And trust that there are still like 7,000 things that I want to do that scare the ever-loving shit out of me. My mom suggested that I give a TED talk, and I think I peed a little when she suggested that. I want Ash Amberjay to come on my show. And Ash, if you're listening, you're the one that has said keep showing up until they can't ignore you anymore. So sorry, not sorry. I'm going to keep showing up in your inbox until you agree to come on my show. The point is, as much as I want to give you guys like one quick fix, like an easy win on how to be more courageous, there really is only one tip. Do something. As my best friend says, I don't care what you do, just do something. And he says it in that accent, which just makes it better, I think. It sounds really oversimplified to say that. I totally get that. So I went on a mission to find more so that I could actually do an entire episode about courage and not just say, do something and then turn off the computer. A member of my coaching group suggested reading the works of, her name looks like Margie Warrell, but I think it's pronounced Margie Warrell. And I happened upon her book, Find Your Courage, and totally dissected it to pieces. And I was discouraged that she also, like myself, had no steps to implement courage into your life, like right away in the next 5 minutes either. Like, I don't think they exist. I was looking for something like do power poses in the mirror for 10 minutes before sitting down with your boss to negotiate a raise. And now that I think about it, that might actually be quite effective. But you know what I mean? Like you see this stuff that says, write this mantra 55 times a day for 5 days and finally discover the courage to profess your love to so-and-so. I was hoping that sort of exercise existed, and it didn't. But what her book did offer were a multitude of ways to set yourself up for success on the road to becoming someone who is more courageous and who inspires others to lead a more courageous life too. And funny enough that most of what she suggested, I've written about on the blog. So I figured, why not devote a little airtime to these topics so that you too can set yourself up to live a fulfilling, multifaceted life. So I'm calling this the Courage series, and there's going to be a few of these because there's actually a lot to cover. But today we are talking about the number one topic that I consider the most vital to having courage and living a courageous life, and that is integrity. So the definition of integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. Also, moral uprightness. The reason I wanted to define it for you guys is because I used to believe that I demonstrated integrity like a boss. I don't lie, even when I know the truth will get me in trouble. I only commit to things I know I'm going to do, and then I do them. The part of this definition that I align with the least is the moral uprightness, because somehow I can't hear those words without thinking of a God-fearing old lady who keeps a Bible in her purse, and that is decidedly not me. I have in my purse, I think, a hunting knife and some smoky quartz and a half-smoked joint. But I do ensure that my actions do no harm to other people. So I was running around saying that integrity was like my number one core value and totally believing that I was living my life full of integrity. Turns out, though, I wasn't even in the ballpark of true integrity for quite a few reasons, actually. And so since this episode is about how to set yourself up to be more courageous, I think it's really critical that we talk about all the things that you need to stop doing first. So you can think of it as like doing a deep spring cleaning of your house. We have to toss out all the old ways of being before you can bring in new, shiny and bright furniture and set yourself up for an entirely new way of being. So if you're anything like me, you will recognize yourself in quite a few of these examples. And if you're anything like me, you might even wonder how the heck you ever thought you were living a life full of integrity when your house is in so much disarray like mine. So what's most interesting about this as I was researching this topic is that fixing each of these different components of your life requires a huge amount of courage. So you must use courage to create a life filled with more courage. Courage begets courage. And I know that feels a little bit like a catch-22. If you don't feel like you are a courageous person, you're like, how on earth am I ever going to do this? But I promise you, it's not. Just doing something is knocking down the first domino, and it just makes it easier from there. So I'm living proof that courage begets courage, and if I can do it, anybody can do it. So let's get started. The number one thing you need to do to live a life full of integrity so that you can live a life that is courageous is to take responsibility. So like it or not, you alone are responsible for the person you are today, the state of your heart, and the shape of your life as a whole. You have to own your experience of your life fully. So your relationships, the satisfaction that you get from the roles that you play at work and at home, all the way down to how you deal with adversity when it comes up, because it will, always, for all of us. Only by doing this can you ultimately find the courage to make the changes that will allow you to create a life that you genuinely enjoy. So what that means is you can't blame your boss for not being farther ahead in your career. And you can't blame your teenager for your distant, kind of awkward relationship. And you can't blame Taco Bell for the fact that your clothes don't fit anymore. And you can't blame your parents for, well, anything. There are so many things, the list is endless, that we blame our parents for. I was in therapy for literally ever. And not that I was being coached to blame my parents in therapy, but it sort of lands there, like always. And we're going to come at this from a totally different side. It is not easy to take ownership for the shitty aspects of your life. I get this. So much I get this. If it was, everybody would be doing it, right? For one thing, we're literally biologically wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, and taking responsibility is super unpleasant. So like it's like a inherent need to push that away. But it's absolutely critical, because when you shift responsibility to someone or something else, you give that person or thing power over your well-being. Think about that. Like, we might not have 100% control over our circumstances, but you have no power unless you take 100% responsibility for your experience of those circumstances and of your life as a whole. It's exactly the same as misdiagnosing a disease. So you go to the doctor, something's wrong with you, he misdiagnoses it, and then you can't be proactive about fixing it, and neither can he, because you don't know what that real problem is. So if you're going around blaming everybody else for your situation, there's no way you have the control or the power to get in there and fix it. It makes sense, right? So when you hold yourself accountable for your circumstances, you don't depend on others to behave a certain way in order for you to get what you want. Maybe you've heard people described this way, or like seen them on TV, like when he wants something, he just takes it. I believe that people like that make their own destiny. They still encounter obstacles, we all do, but instead of accepting defeat, they pivot and just keep on trudging towards the finish line. Someone like that would never say, well, I don't get the promotion, so I guess that's that, and like let their work ethic totally slide. They just wouldn't do that. They wouldn't allow their life to be less than great. They would just decide to make their life great, regardless of the fact that they didn't get the promotion. So it's a choice, man. If you want it, it is there for the taking if you so choose. Ultimately, we create our realities. And I know you probably hear that thrown around a lot, and maybe it's never actually sunken in what that means. So I have a blog post called The World According to You, and I'll link to it, because I would say on my self-development journey, this discovery was the most fascinating / mind-blowing out of everything I've ever come across. So I'll try to explain it here quickly, see if I can do a decent job. I'm sure my post will be a little bit more succinct. I was reading a book called The Buddha's Brain. So this is based on neuroscience. This is like a scientific explanation for the fact that we do indeed create our realities. And what they were explaining was there's so much external stimulus in our environment that our brains can't take it all in. If they tried, they would short circuit or explode. So we actually only see and are able to process and analyze like a very small percentage. I want to say it's like 10%. So picture that 10% is what you can see and interact with and relate to. And there's 90% of the environment that's like in your blind spot. Like when you're driving, you have that blind spot that you learn about in driver's ed when you're 16 years old. That's where the other 90% of reality is. It's invisible to you. So what is visible, and this part makes a lot of sense, is only the stuff that you have a way of relating to. So it's things you've seen before that your brain recognizes. If you tell yourself a certain story, your world is going to look like that story. If you are a very optimistic person, you're going to look around you and you're going to see a lot of beauty in the world. Versus if you're a pessimist, you're going to see like the homeless guy peeing in the corner and like a lady screaming at her kid for something. You kind of seek out that which your brain recognizes and identifies with. And so this is a really big argument for write the story the way you want it to look. And it will begin to look like that. So I've always thought of this as a woman who really wants to meet Mr. Right, but has told herself the story that there are no good men left who are available. So she goes to a bar and the bar is full of people, but she can only take in 10% of what's happening in the bar. And our minds don't know the difference between truth and reality. So if we are telling ourselves a story on repeat all the time, that story becomes the reality. So her reality is there are no good men left. So literally there could be an eligible bachelor standing in the corner quietly nursing his drink, just looking around, and she wouldn't even know he was there. She wouldn't even be able to pick up on the signals of what it looks like to encounter a man who's eligible and good and kind and, you know, worthy of her. So let's say even that they run into each other in line at the bathroom. They might have an interaction. She might actually like have contact with this person, but she still isn't going to, her brain isn't going to trigger those like alarm bells for her because that's not the story that she has written and that her brain can see. So another way of looking at this is, and this has happened, I think, for all of us, so you can probably relate to this one fairly easily. If you've ever decided to buy a car and started doing research on cars. Like I wanted the car before the one I have now, I wanted a 4-door convertible, and Volkswagen makes something called an EOS. I had never heard of them. I had never seen them anywhere. But as soon as I started researching the EOS, I saw EOSes everywhere I went all the time. I was like, how did these never existed? Now that I know they do, they do. That is a prime example. There was nothing to relate or set off alarms for me when an EOS drove by me before I had done the research myself and knew that such a thing existed. So all of this really makes a very solid argument for you create your reality. So if this is kind of new to you, you may even want to read The Buddha's Brain. It's in the front portion of the book. And of course, they'll explain it better than I did. And you can also read my blog post, but it sort of changed the game for me to understand just how much control I do have over the way that my life looks. So let's talk about why we do this blaming other people, passing the buck, shifting responsibility stuff. We actually get payoffs, like rewards, quote unquote, for this behavior, this pointing finger behavior. For one, our discomfort is minimized, right? And avoiding pain is such a regular activity that we engage in that can actually, like, these rewards can become as addictive as narcotics. Like, it's scientifically proven. So you might have a pattern of behavior that you are addicted to and not even know that that's happening. Think about the different payoffs that you get for blaming other people. You get to say, it's not my fault. Nothing is my fault. I say that all the time. You can play poor me. We live in a culture of victimhood. I'm sure you are aware of this. You probably know someone who plays this role all the time, and they are literally addicted to people being like, oh my God, that's so sorry. And they complain and someone listens and there's empathy and, oh, do you need a hug? All of that. Like, that is a real, legit addiction for people. Another payoff would be an excuse to play it safe and never have to take any risk. But that's the thing. Then your life is going to be same shit, different day. And if you want a different life that looks more bright and sparkly, you're going to have to do something that moves you out of your comfort zone. So I want to circle back for a second. And since as long as we're talking about taking responsibility for your life, and talk about children. Obviously, there are events that happen to people for which they cannot be held responsible. So things that happen to you as a child or to other children that you know are not on them. But again, it's really important to clarify that when I say take responsibility, I am not suggesting that any of this is your fault, like you suck at life, like if you weren't such a loser, that thing wouldn't have happened. That's not what this is about. It is merely understanding the roles that you play so that you can sort of proactively avoid making the same mistakes in the future. This is not an opportunity to beat yourself up or make disparaging comments about yourself. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, children obviously can't be held responsible for the events in their lives, but every single one of us can choose how we think about the things that happened to us as children. So it's a choice between harboring resentment and anger and bitterness, or choosing the impact that our childhood is going to have on our lives today and on the life that we want to create for ourselves tomorrow. you hear stories all the time about people who have overcome great personal tragedies, like had accidents and lost the ability to walk and have to spend the rest of their life in a wheelchair, but they've chosen to respond to their circumstances in a positive way. These people tend to be grateful for the inner growth and the strength that was required of them that like maybe didn't even know that they had. They're grateful for their day-to-day experience of being alive, and they have a bigger appreciation for everything that is good in their life. They practice gratitude more maybe than the rest of us do. So again, that's their choice, and that is a choice that you can make as well. On the other hand, the people who are the unhappiest and least successful in their lives are also the most resistant to the notion that they are responsible for their lives. I had this experience working in a dive bar, and I think it's specific to dive bars because in like swanky joints, people come in and they wait for their table to be ready for dinner, and then they go sit at their table, or they eat at the bar and they leave. Dive bars are where people come and they drink from morning until night. The same people in a lot of cases. And you've heard me talk in other episodes, like I made some lifelong friends in that bar. So I'm not just shit talking, but I will say that since most bartenders are pseudo therapists, we get a lot of like, woe is me crap hurled at us during a shift. And I would hear that stuff. And, you know, I like to help people. So I would always say like, well, have you considered this? Or what if you just applied for a different job? Or what if you know, have you thought about this? And every single option that I presented was met with like, no, I can't, or I don't have the money for that, or I don't have the skill set for that, or who would watch the baby? Or like, it was just always something. And it became really exhausting and disheartening that there are so many people that don't want to get out of their own way. They are addicted to the poor me mentality. And so at no point can I convince those people that they're responsible for their lives, because then the onus is on them to change it rather than like the government doesn't pay me enough in welfare, So if you feel like this area is an area where you might fall a little short, you can do this exercise to just help you start seeing new ways to take responsibility. So think of a problem in your life that is causing you to feel angry, resentful, dissatisfied, and then ask yourself how you might have contributed to that problem. So we contribute to the problems in our life in 3 different ways. We cause them, all right? So like you live beyond your means and now you're in thousands of dollars worth of credit card debt. That's one way. We also might have something happen to us where the circumstance itself is completely out of our control, but our response made the thing worse. So your child crashed the family car and you totally freaked out and lost your temper and said a bunch of mean stuff that damaged your relationship with your kid. Okay, that's another way that you contribute to your problems. The third way is sort of the opposite of that one. It's by not responding. It's by playing the ostrich with your head buried in the sand. That's if your doctor tells you to lose weight or things are going to get serious and you don't, and now you've been diagnosed with diabetes. Or you avoid having a difficult conversation because it's going to be uncomfortable and your relationship with that person just becomes more and more distant and estranged. So again, I want to remind you, this is not an opportunity to beat yourself up. You're not stupid. You're not a failure. I don't want to hear a word of that crap. This is just a sensible examination of how you played a role in an outcome. It's just a new way of looking at things if you've never thought about this stuff before. So ask yourself, what choices did I make that led to this result that I didn't want? Is there anything I could have done to be more proactive about this situation? Like if you saw something coming and you just didn't do anything about it, ask yourself, kind of think about that. Did you trust someone that you shouldn't have or not trust someone that you should have? Did you settle for less than you really wanted? Right? Did you commit to something for the wrong reasons? Did you compromise your integrity for the sake of immediate peace or pleasure? That last one was huge for me. Huge. I used to avoid conflict at all costs. Like, I stuffed my feelings down during one stint of my life so successfully that my hair started falling out. Honestly, it took that. When my hair started falling out, I was like, oh my God, wake up, girl, get out. But you'd be amazed how much shit I was willing to take for the sake of keeping the peace. And that there is like a huge example of how wrong I was when I believed that I was living a life full of integrity. So this brings me to a second definition of integrity, and that is the state of being whole and undivided. So integrity has the same root as the word integer, and integer just meant in school when we were learning about integers, a whole number. So it just means being whole, living a wholehearted life. That's the thing that Brene Brown talks about all the time. So it is a fact that you cannot be in conflict with your heart, living your external life one way that's disconnected from your internal life. And since we must live from the heart in order to have courage, the heart must be whole as opposed to being filled with compromise and disharmony. It's just, there's no other way to go about it. So think about it this way. To truly live with integrity, there must be a unity between what your heart calls you to do and what you're doing, and between who your heart calls you to be and who you're being. And when those things aren't aligned, you experience something called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance describes when there's inner conflict that results from a discord between our beliefs and our actions. So I've had this like in my life forever, for my whole life. And we say certain things to ourselves to justify the, like, acknowledge it. Like, you'll feel cognitive dissonance inside of you and you'll still be doing the thing that doesn't align with your heart and doesn't make sense. And then you'll just come up with an excuse that you feel validates that decision to act in discordance with your heart. You might say something like, well, everybody else is doing it, right? What's the point of speaking up? It won't change anything. They don't pay me enough. So of course I steal toilet paper. And you guys might be laughing about that one, but that is straight up a conversation I had with a friend of mine once upon a time. Like, he felt validated doing that. You might say, well, my husband's checked out of the relationship, so why shouldn't I? Excuses like this run rampant, but that's what they are. They're excuses. We know what's right. You all know what's right. Your hearts do. It's just a matter of listening. And quite frankly, doing the right thing is almost never easy or convenient. Here again, that's what makes this so challenging. So let's pause for a beat so that you can consider what integrity means for you, because it means different things to different people. It could be honoring your commitments, or being ethical in business, or not cheating on your spouse. No matter what it looks like for you, ultimately, what the thing has in common amongst all of us is that integrity means not looking outward to society for guidance, but looking inward to your heart. So here's how you do a self-check around this topic of living with integrity. Ponder these questions. Are you being the person you were born to be? Are you being true to yourself? Are you settling for less than what you really want? If you've been settling for less than what you aspire to, then you are not living a life of integrity. If you turn a deaf ear to what brings you a deep sense of joy or satisfaction, then you are not living in your integrity. Is there any other part of your life that just doesn't feel quite right, where there's a discrepancy between who you want to be and who you're actually being? Think about these questions and see what comes up for you. And just remember that the cost of staying this way, of just continuing to wake up and do the same thing day after day, is that it undermines your peace of mind and your sense of self-worth. Every time you do something that's not in your integrity, I feel like a little part of you is kind of disgusted It's like, I should know better. I love the question Ash Amberjay asks in her book is, what feels the most like self-respect right now? And I think that when we do things that are out of alignment with what our hearts know to be true, we understand that that isn't acting out of self-respect. And I mean, God forbid we sacrifice that for anything, for anyone else. So you can sort of imagine living your life with integrity like building a house, and like the foundation of the house has to be solid and put together exactly the right way. Otherwise, a storm comes along and the house falls down. So if you want to live a bigger and more rewarding life, you need to have a rock solid internal foundation, and that it is built on integrity. That is how you get that. But to get it, you have to give up the rewards that you're so attached to. And like I said, they're an addiction, so don't feel bad. Just be aware so that you can make the positive changes that you need to. These rewards could be like, I love getting sympathy. I don't know how to let that go. Or I love getting more than my fair share. Like, I don't make a lot of money. So, every once in a while, just a little bit extra, I deserve it, or whatever the story is. Maybe the reward that you're attached to is an absence of confrontation. I want to say like 80% of the people that I know in the world abide by that philosophy. Ooh, I don't want to bring it up. So I understand that letting go of these rewards takes courage. It does. None of this that I'm talking about today is easy. But I guarantee you that if you do this, you will begin to feel more powerful about what you can do with your life, about literally anything. And I think it will become apparent that what you get through living with integrity far outweighs what you have to give up. 100%. So your action step is to think of an issue where you maybe have been acting out of alignment with your heart. Maybe something you've been avoiding. And then just do something. So maybe that's treat the people in your life with greater dignity or respect. Or maybe it's no longer saying what people want to hear at the expense of your truth. It's a good one. Maybe it's not doing anything that you would absolutely hate if others found out about, like stealing toilet paper. Years ago, I decided that I would never say anything out loud that I wouldn't want the person about whom I was speaking to overhear. So if I would be like crushed that they heard that mean thing that I said, or mortified or embarrassed or any of those descriptives, I will not say that thing out loud. I will not say a thing that I wouldn't say to someone's face. That for me was a huge shift that really, I think, made me a significantly better person. But that's a self-check. Like, how would I feel if someone watched me do this right now? If you would feel gross about it, stop doing it. Just do one thing today. Doesn't matter what you do, just do something. So what do you guys think? That's a wrap, but there's a lot more about this to come. And I think it's going to be great because I think when you integrate all of these lessons together, you're going to be like the most bravest badass that's ever lived. And I'm really excited for that to happen for you. So I have a fun word of the day today. It is heuristic. And it's spelled kind of weird. So I'll obviously include it in the show notes, but it's Heuristic. Heuristic. It means any approach to problem solving or self-discovery that employs a practical method that is not guaranteed to be optimal, perfect, or rational, but is nevertheless sufficient for reaching a short-term goal. I liked this word because I wanted to do a podcast episode that identified a heuristic way to become more courageous. But no dice. What you are getting instead is an entire series about the more in-depth essentials that you need to set you up to live your most courageous life. So not important. There's just a little more work involved. But nothing worth having is easily acquired, am I right? You know this. So please subscribe, guys. If you have not yet done so, I would be ever so grateful. And if you would drop me a quick review, that would be amazing. Just a little 5 stars in there, but also leave me a note. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you want to hear. That stuff is gold. It makes me get out of bed in the morning. So please, if you haven't had a moment to do it, I would be ever so grateful if you did. And please share this series with anyone that you know who is an everything enthusiast so that they can start living the dream too. Guys, I'd really appreciate that as well. And thank you again, as always, for being here. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to speaking with you in the next episode.